answer. Okay, welcome back, and this is time for Dharma discussion and questions. So how about if we each take a moment to check into our hearts and think about your practice and think about what kind of question you have. It's good to carry a question, I find, in relationship to the Dharma, particularly an unanswered question that you just carry and you ponder over and live it. So we'll take a minute of quiet and see what comes up for you. And whenever someone is ready, then may we hear from you for the benefit of everybody. Trevor, we need a microphone. Here it comes.
I guess this is more of it's a little bit of a generalized question, but I think one of the big things that's a challenge and through, like, let's say the Tonglen type of practices and loving kindness, meditation type practices. So in your daily interactions with people, one of the things I've probably had challenges with my whole life is setting boundaries. So in conversations or just in, what is your guys' perspective, I guess, with setting healthy boundaries, but coming from, I guess, more of a, again, from a Buddhist perspective of it, or a compassionate perspective, but when you do have to cut things off, whether it's in relationships or in work experiences, just any suggestions you guys had on that?
Oh, that's a great question. So you started that question with like practices like Tonglen and loving kindness, and yet we are human, and we have our limits. We have our human limits. We have limitless Buddha nature, which we're uncovering and getting in touch with. But here we are with this personality, this body, this experience. And to me, that's what that question's about, trying to balance the boundaries thing. So the way I think about it is the practices, the contemplative practices of Tonglen, loving kindness, equanimity, compassion, those are aimed at training your mind. They're aimed at training your mind. And as we train the mind, I experience that my capacity for doing my capacity for skillful means, upaya, grows as my mind becomes more flexible, strengthened. There's a courage aspect in there too, a willingness to do things, try things, a willingness to, quote, mess up and not let that bottom us out. So, but that's all, train the mind. Then a kind of clarity, natural clarity arises. And then the skillful means arises. One of the skillful means is to refrain, to back off, to set a boundary. Now, boundary is interesting because it's a Western psychological term. And anytime we run into these Western psychological terms, they can be exceedingly helpful. We need to be clear, that's what it is, and it's helpful. It's not Buddhist philosophy, but to me, it fits in with the skillful means place. Because if lacking boundaries, I have engaged in a lot of well, this is kind of a little harsh judgment, but I like it because it's funny too. Idiot compassion. A lot of idiot compassion, I'm going to save the whole world. And I just did this with a friend this week, a dear friend. I went into idiot compassion and just told her exactly what she needed to do. And this was the right thing. And oh my God. What I did get out of it, due to her kindness and patience, was a big mirror to look at. Oh, Zopa, you're just all about, big ego stepped in, and now you're judging the other. Maybe you're kind of harsh to her. Maybe you're harsh to yourself. So, we learn off of those. But let me see if there's anything else. Oh, this boundary thing. So, on the everyday common level, which can also be called the relative level, the conventional level, we need this kind of, we need to figure out, what can I do? What can I not do? How do I take good care of myself in this situation? And how do I take good care of the other? Some of us who come into, well, it doesn't matter, come into Buddhism or not. Some of us are, another friend gave me this phrase. She said, "Oh, you're a border collie." I loved it because it gave me another way to look. The border collie runs around the rim and is constantly scouting all the sheep to make sure they don't fall off the cliff, and they do this and they do that, and they don't do this and they don't do that. Some of you are resonating, you sort of see. The border collie kind of needs to calm down a little and realize the Buddha nature of the other. Trust they are on their path. They have their Buddha nature, just like I do. They're figuring something out. I'll give one more example, and then I want to hear from Bill and Dora on this, because this is just a very rich question, Trevor. Others have their own Buddha nature and are figuring it out. And one other very good example for me, and I share these personal ones hoping they help ground the philosophy. It has taken me a long time to see that me being a border collie with my son, it just constantly backfires. He doesn't want that. He doesn't need that. He needs me just to love him, trust him, have confidence in his goodness. And when I'm doing the fix thing, it's kind of saying to someone else, you don't know what you're doing, and I know what you should be doing. And boy, don't we run away from that when we see it, you know. So the boundary is interesting, because the boundaries, sometimes we think it's about putting a boundary around someone else. I think what my experience is, it's putting a boundary around my own afflictions. It's a boundary around me seeing where I'm not skillful, I'm confused, and putting a boundary around that. And sometimes that means, Zopa, don't do or say anything right now because you don't have enough wisdom. You don't have skillful means. Just go take care of yourself right now in a good way, you know, meditate, you know, do something, not just, you know, not just go have a fancy meal because we can take care of ourselves, but really take gentle, good care. And that will help. Then in that, you can do Tonglen away from the person. Do it for yourself, your own confused self. Do it for the other's confusion. Do it for all beings who are in this confused state. And that will calm things down. Border collies are really neat. I want one. And I was thinking this morning that there's each pattern has its beauty. Like a border collie is courageous and loyal and really cares. So each of these patterns also has, you know, a real strength and then a weakness. And we find it in ourselves and work with it. Is that kind of on the spot? Okay, Bill.
I also noted the word boundary, that it's in very common usage, and it has a particular origin. And you offered some observations about that. I was looking to something, I try to reverse engineer some of these things. If I was going to put this back and find out where something similar, I could find something similar in the Dharma and then see what the implications are, what the compare and the contrast is. I look into the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva came to mind. And in there's a reference to if you're hanging out with friends and your good qualities increase, then keep up the good work. If you're hanging out with people and you find that your negative qualities increase, it's a good time to step back. And this is more related to our own capacity, as you were talking about, the skillful means, our own capacity. This because we can imagine that there's some people who walk into the midst of complete chaos, social and emotional chaos, and they are actually quite skillful there. They're not drawn, they're not drowned in it. They're not, their negative qualities don't increase. So we can't say, oh, it's that situation. That it's more a matter of the capacity. So it's really a matter of recognizing our capacity to act. The thing that I think is a little problematic in the notion of boundary is it's generally talking about protecting, kind of a protection circle for ourselves. And but we have to figure out what it is that we're really protecting. It's not protecting our sense of comfort and ease. In this case, it's protecting our practice. It's protecting the path of transformation. Is that actually going to thrive in this situation or be damaged, and in turn us doing something damaging for others?
Dora said, sounds good. other, Jane, yeah.
There were just two observations. The first one is that Shantideva has a wonderful, it's a sort of boundary. It's kind of like your grandmother saying, if you
Is
can't.
that on? Because I'm not.
It's
I'm not
green.
hearing.
Is that
okay? Great.
Can you hear?
It's
Okay.
my hearing, not that.
What he says is, if your speech is about to be an occasion of hurting someone else and yourself, then do the noble practice of being a log. Just be silent. Step back and don't react. That non-reactiveness provides a kind of boundary. And the other thing is that I've been thinking about this a lot, and it seems to me that as a Buddhist, my boundaries are not where other people's boundaries are. I'm inclined to do things or make exceptions for people that cause my other friends to go, "What are you doing? This is not correct." I don't, I just think that there's a difference in boundaries as we think of it, and boundaries as we think of it as Buddhists. So, but Shantideva's boundary of silence is a good one.
Yeah. One of the things that your comments point out, and pretty much every teacher I've ever been around, when we step onto the Buddhist path seriously with some intention, we begin to give up conventional opinion. A conventional opinion. I don't mean completely, because that's dangerous too. We need to keep our ethics. But more precisely, we give up what others think of us, because they won't understand a lot of times of what we're doing. If you try and describe the Bodhisattva path to someone who's just, in the average bear, I say, with love. I don't mean to denigrate people, but to the average bear, they'll say, that's just nuts. It's not achievable to, free all beings. It's, to end all afflictions in your mind, not possible. But we have to let go of those opinions and say, well, it's working for me to try. And I'm just using that as one example. So I think that's what you're pointing at, right, Jane? Yeah. We set out in a kind of a courageous way, but not foolish. A courageous way. It's hard to give up the opinions of others. That's why it's referred to as one of the 8 worldly concerns. There's 2 of them related to that. We really like praise, and we really don't like blame. And we spend a lot of our times, worldly concerns, getting praise from others, but think of what you have to do to get that. Sometimes you even do unethical things to get it, or you find yourself going along with someone to get their praise, but they're not a good leader, And so praise and blame, the other one's good and bad reputation. We'll do a lot to keep a reputation. And it may not be the most ethical thing to do. I tell that story, and some of you, if you're bored with it, just raise your hand. But my teacher saying, because I just learned so much from this. When I was being sued for sexual harassment that I didn't do from an employee, which was just horrific at the time. Now I understand it was a great lesson. It took years to get there with it. But I went to her and I was just devastated about my reputation. I was an executive director of a county agency. It was kind of a public sort of job. And this complaint was made public by the other person. So to the whole board of county commissioners of Clackamas County and to judges and to, it was quite an interesting ride. And she said, well, what's your main concern? And I said, well, reputation, because that's really important to have good reputation with people. And she was very calm and she said, yeah, so what's a reputation? I mean, she was always helping dissect things. What's a reputation? Think about it. And she said, I was stunned. I thought, oh, she doesn't care about me or doesn't get it. But she said, it's opinions by people. How often do those change? How solid are they? You do something today and you have a great reputation with this one. Tomorrow you have a bad reputation because they didn't like what you did. Reputation is opinions, and they flow and they change. And so then she said, what is important is your ethics, your integrity. Do you know that you did something you need to straighten around? Then do that. If there's nothing to do about it, as Shanti Deva says, don't worry about it. This is also in the same text we're talking about. The way of the Bodhisattva. If there's something you can do about the situation, get clear and do it. If there's nothing you can do about the situation because you're not in charge, you don't have the capacity, let go. Meditate, send loving kindness, whatever. But don't be trying to tinker. So I just worked that and stuck with integrity and ethics and got through it because I hadn't done that. But took a while. So it's an interesting thing to think about the opinions of the world, let's say. The opinions of the world about what you do are, to be taken into account. You don't want to seem like some wacko crazy that no one wants to connect with, but not to be the guiding force. Guiding force is the Buddha wisdom in your heart and the teachings, following the path. And of course you'll get criticized. Of course you'll get misunderstood. Of course. Look at the Dalai Lama, my God. So people pick at him and they, the Chinese say he's a devil and, But like Bill was pointing out, some people can be in those conditions and not be disturbed. So that's what we're aiming for. Anything?
Hi, my name's Doug. I'm fairly new here.
Doug?
Doug, yes.
Thanks.
I hesitated to ask a question, but is that better?
Yeah. There
Okay.
You go. Yeah,
Anyway, I thought
free.
I'd try and be brave.
Good.
I'm a question that comes up for me just as a practical matter. I'm here. I've been involved with Shambhala Buddhism for quite some time. Is just a question of what practice to choose on any particular day at any particular moment. And I mean, I have gotten advice about that, you decide for yourself
Yeah.
based on your own needs and what seems to be best. But sometimes, for me personally, that doesn't seem quite enough to settle the matter. So I'm wondering if you all have something to say about that.
Yeah, I'm wondering for myself still, after 23 years of exposure to Buddhism. That's such a good question. I think that one of the ways I work with it is we're in a certain context here in the U.S. right now where we are inundated with information, including information about practices, which, you can imagine, I don't know, I like to imagine someone, back in the days who had one teacher in a monastery that said, this is the practice for you, do it, check in with me, do it some more, check in with me. That's the ideal kind of circumstance, or possibly a good circumstance, because you'd have this constant guidance. So here we are in this situation. You put a word in Google, a Buddhist word, even a practice, Tonglen, you're going to get 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 hits on just that one thing. Put in shamatha, same thing. So we have all this information, which is really good karma. I mean, we have created this karma to have a cornucopia of teachings. At the same time, we have the conditions to have pressure on our time all the time. No time, no time, no time, no time to do these things. No time to study, contemplate, meditate. Those are the three wisdoms in our tradition. You study, you contemplate what you studied, and then you let all that concept go and meditate. But which study, which contemplation, which meditation? So, we have, smorgasbords you can get stomach aches from. You eat a little of this and a little of that and a little of that. Pretty soon you're like, whoa, I don't know where I'm at. What I have found helpful is private interviews with teachers who you feel connected with, asking further than asking the very question you're asking, but one-on-one, because it would take, from my perspective, it would take me to get some background from you. But here's one thing a number of things you can do for yourself. What works? What's working for you? You've been practicing for a while, right? So you have a sense of something working, or sit and ask that question. Working meaning is where your compassion grows, where your clarity grows. And we get impatient to have some results to test. Like, well, I don't know, Well, then keep trying. Try a few different things. Don't try the whole smorgasbord. Pick a few, the ones you've been doing that feel like they're working. If you feel like you need something refreshing, maybe add one more. Just try it out. Set a time. I'm going to do this 30 days. I do this with some things now. I'm going to do this one 30 days. Every day. See what happens. So it's experimental. Bill has this phrase I've always liked, run the experiment. But run it with a lot of patience. In the West, we are trained to want our grade and instant results, by the end of the quarter. And it doesn't work that way. The Dalai Lama says check in every 6 months with your own practice and see, am I growing in kindness? Am I more relaxed? Am I able to remember to send loving kindness to others instead of animosity? Is my judgmental mind going down? Am I able to sit in shamatha with a little less? So these can be the measures. I don't know if that's helpful. It's hard to find it. Bill, help us. Help us.
Well, I was about to say something, then you said help us, and then I thought, I'm not so sure.
Oh, set boundaries.
Yeah, set boundaries. It can be helpful also to have a sense of, you could say, the arc of the path a little bit of the context of practice, and whatever practice it is, with the practices related to renunciation, being able to check on what contributes to the ability to step back from impulses that are unhelpful and unskillful. So there's something there. That's a whole kind of area of practice, just learning to step back from those things. There's the area of practice that involves looking more into the nature of phenomena, the nature of mind, and the development of profound compassion. And it's easier on that to look at, as you were saying, how is my loving kindness going? Do I feel kind of warmer in general to people, less engaged in kind of the emotional bartering with the world, where I'll be nice to you if you're nice to me? How much am I able to just generate a kind of a general background level of warmth towards others? And then as we go farther, then how much can I actually, how is my capacity to actually see into the nature of mind? How is that developing? And we need to have some sense of what we're actually kind of what we're really working on, and the side of ethics and renunciation, loving kindness, compassion, the four immeasurables. That's kind of one general area, and to be able to review, to look at our life and look at our practice and see, are we actually addressing the difficult things? There is that phrase in the mind training tradition of heap all your practice on the most difficult point. So we shouldn't shy away from something. But in that, it also gives us a little perspective. The difficult point is not going to be the one that necessarily yields the quickest results. And we won't necessarily feel highly successful. And that will all, in turn, the sense of lack of feeling highly successful will in turn say, maybe I should be doing something else. Yeah. And in this, then, we can get some help in that. But part of it is really looking at what are the challenging points in our practice? What challenges are we really addressing? And do we feel we understand the methods of practice to address those challenges? How to go deeper? Do we understand those things? So there's a certain amount of study and questioning, dialogue involved in continually deepening that. But part of it is just really settling on, okay, I see what I need to kind of heap my practice on, and then kind of getting some, as you said, getting some assistance in kind of nudging things along in the right direction. But in the end, as again, mind training, of the two witnesses, rely on the primary one. You actually always have to come back to that. We're the ones that have the front row seat into what's going on. And if we can develop a deep honesty about that, a gentle, I'll say gentle honesty, because oftentimes we're faking honesty and just piling judgment on ourselves. So that kind of gentle honesty is kind of a critical, essential piece.
Well, I would add to all of those good comments something simple, which is just reflecting on our teacher, Boka Rinpoche, and how he made an effort to give us something that was like a workable path. And he talked to us about, so he set up what we call the Mahamudra program, specifically for his Western lay disciples, and recognizing that we weren't going to be practicing all day every day, but that we wanted to make progress in the path. And so he would say that what he would say, like, the Dharma is so vast. There's so many methods. There's so much you could learn. There's so much you could study. So much you could do. But what he tried to do was lay out, here is a path that has some different pieces that if you put that together, it's complete. So it's not the only approach, but that general concept, I think, is useful to realize that we don't have to do everything, but we have to do something. And as Bill said, I think having the sense of what's the whole thing look like, as far as I can understand it from here. And so where am I kind of in that? And then what Boka Rinpoche did was he had us, and we're doing this still with Khenpo Lodro Dunye Rinpoche, where we gather for a seminar, we get teachings, we get, sort of the study element going, we get inspiration from being around the teacher, from being together, and then he gave, and still we get, a yearly practice commitment. So that's kind of getting to the sense of, and he gave several different practices. And again, working on some of the different aspects, like cultivating our ability, our attention through shamatha, cultivating insight into the nature of self and reality, cultivating compassion, and so forth. And so then breaking that down, and this is just an example. So he gives a daily, you make a practice commitment for a year in that program. So that's just an example. You could make a practice commitment like for a month or for 6 months or something. But I think that is a useful device and because of like what Zopa's saying, you can have ups and downs, or your mind can say, oh no, I guess this isn't really working. I'll do something different tomorrow, and everything just scattered all over the place. So making kind of a commitment, and then what he has us do is each day a certain practice that we always do, and then on a kind of more of a, we could do more of a, you decide when to do it, but so there's one that's a kind of a yearly commitment that you could really do, break down like doing something weekly. So if you have more time on the weekend, you have a longer, a way to do that, or you could divide that up daily. And then he had a quarterly commitment. And in any case, that idea of having, and the Tibetans are very big, of course, on counting things. And if you do, say, a Chenrezig practice or something, you count numbers of mantras, but also just counting time, setting aside a certain amount of time is useful. I think having, that kind of structure that we decide not so much in the moment of, I think there's a place for that also, of like at times sitting and just saying, what do I want to do right now? But it's also can be very useful to have a framework that I'm working on this practice. I'm going to do it for this long, and I'm, have a sense of where it fits in the whole scheme, and I'm going to look at it, like Zopa says, retrospectively and say, did that seem to help me or not? And maybe now I have the wish to do a different practice or an additional practice, or just go deeper with this one. But in any case, that's the simple tool of making a commitment to push ourselves a little bit, not to then get into this situation of beating ourselves up of, oh, I didn't do the whole thing, or I didn't keep it today or yesterday or whatever. Oh, I'm a loser. Anyways, but just something to keep us going and and help our sense of keeping our involvement going and a sense of progress.
So the trick about the Mahamudra program for us now, one of them is that quite a big core of people here got trained in it very well. And then it used to be true before the 1 year and 3 year retreats. Oh, I guess during the 1 year there was a Mahamudra seminar. It's been a little harder to get the overview training in it. But there's a trip to India this January, which is important for us to announce. And if you're interested in that, talk to Dora or Bill or Julie Herlucker. But for many people who can't access that, and then we've not been able to use our retreat center because for the wonderful reason that 8 people are out there in 3-year retreat and out this next year, it's a little bit of more of a mystery of, well, what is the Mahamudra and how would I engage it? But you can talk with these folks about it. I think Dora touched on this really important part, and so did Bill, about this overview of the Buddhist path, and it can seem quite daunting in a certain way when we look at any of the blueprints, like Mahamudra is one blueprint, but there are others. But the point is to know the blueprint, pick a place to start, have guidance from someone who at least is 2 steps before you or 1, and then to rejoice in what you've already done. This is so important, that we don't get stuck in, I don't have time to do it, or as Doris said, we don't get stuck in self-criticism, which will discourage our practice, but realizing that Buddhism is so rich that pretty much any one of these pieces would get you to full awakening if we just did it, with every energy we have. So we don't need to taste everything on the table. But we do need some guidance, as you've asked, in, well, which and what. And so one of the pieces is so important to encourage ourselves, so important to rejoice in every step we take. And I'm thinking of one time I went to Lama Michael, confused and discouraged, and he said at the end of it, after being helpful on many particular points, he said, you need to practice now for your next life. And it just opens up. We have endless time before us and behind us, according to Buddhist teachings. So we get so impatient. I'm not saying you are, but we do. You are too. Yeah, I don't know anyone who isn't. It's all on a continuum. To have results, to have something figured out now, to do the right thing, we have to open up to beginningless, endless time, and to be kind and compassionate to this little donkey self that's trotting along. And we don't put the load of an ox on a donkey. It's one of the mind training slogans that I like. Don't put the load of an ox on a donkey, expecting self to already have this all figured out and pick the right thing and every day, make this much progress. It's not realistic. So one more thing, and then we're at the end.
Just a little, I just wanted to, correct myself a little bit, just to say that, or add to, that all those elements that are in the Mahamudra program are the core of what we teach here every week, every day, every year at KCC here. So it's not, I'm not saying that you've got to be in that program to get those teachings, and it's more that a person can put together for themselves and with a mentor's help also their own version could be very similar to the Mahamudra program, or it could take some components of it, or it could be slightly different, but just as effective. And so I didn't mean to say that, you got to do that program, and that actually that's what we're doing here all the time, but the structure isn't as clear unless you've kind of worked one out for yourself.
Yeah, we do the pieces over and over here, particularly shamatha and insight. Okay, thank you so much for your help.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Thank you. Have a good week. There's Chenrezig practice here Wednesday evening, so please come if you can.